share their thoughts about the history of Great Saltpeter Cave and its listing on the National Register of Historic Places. First, I'd like to invite Roland Mullins. He was born in the Crooked Creek Valley and lived here with his family until he was about 5. Some of you may remember his work as a teacher or as a mental health or in the mental health realm. More may remember him as a former mayor of Mount Vernon or as Rockcastle County Judge Executive. But I know him as a repository of the history of the Mullins family going back to around 1800 when they first came here from Virginia. Roland?
It's always a good day to come to the cave. When it's cold, it's warm. When it's hot, it's cold. So the rain and the cloudy weather doesn't bother us today. Nina asked me to talk to you about 150 years of history, but she gave me 3 to 5 minutes. But I'm going to have to cut it pretty short. And in order that you know how the story ends, I'm going to start at the end of it and work backwards. So when we start cutting, we'll work on the rest of it next year. But in 1945, my brother came back from World War II, and we lived just down the creek, about 3/4 of a mile. He came back and he'd seen the world, the world in pretty tough circumstances. But anyway, he and Dad got together and went to Renfro Valley and bought a farm and decided to move from the valley. And I'm going to read to you just a paragraph here about that day. I think it was the fall of 1945 when our family moved. Dallas had returned from the war. He, Dad, and Frank partnered and bought the Renfro Valley place, just one farm away from Renfro Creek, another tributary of Roundstone Creek. The hill behind Crooked Creek was basically a north slope with late thaws and wet, muddy paths that a wagon and team could traverse with difficulty. It was from this route that mules pulling a wagon delivered us to a new beginning. The heavy load included a Victrola on which a leg had broken that day. It was forever relegated to the old house in Renfro Valley where we stored the extras and eventually alfalfa hay. Behind the wagon walked the older children. Iris Rose, the youngest walker, carried her yellow cat. This cat made it to Renfro Valley, where, like the rest of us, lived a fat life. The leather harness squeaked, the trace chains popped, and the wheels bumped up onto rock ledges out of the sticky clay as the mules squatted, leaning into their collars halfway up the hill near the cove where Dad often took out coal for family use. The mules had to be given a breather. Mom likely stood on the wagon seat, a board laid across the bed to brace. We didn't have a spring seat. And looked back down the valley, down past the swirl hole, down to the Lloyd Wretch, and then to the knoll where Champ's tombstone was barely visible. And her eyes rested on the sacred spot that held the babies. She probably took one last look at the 2 houses, the barns, the shop house, the smokehouse, the gardens, the orchard, and her flowers. Though she didn't dig up to the new place. Again she sat, adjusted her bonnet and dreamed. She was the one who knew this had to be. We've been here on the river since sometime 1790 to 1805, during that period. Came into the White Oak Branch area, settled on the Rockcastle River, moved in a sawmill from up on the Licking River. The Indians ran some of the family off from up there. And we were taking out this big timber. We were in here for timber, the water, the wildlife, and freedom, which we took very serious, still do. At the time we left, the hollows had emptied. Before this, every hollow was full of people. Morris Valley, Buck Lick, Crooked Creek, Drew Valley, Piney Branch, and White Oak Branch, Singleton Valley, just to name a few. In 1930, the county population was around 17,000 to 18,000. not quite that yet. We're almost 18,000 now. The county seat, Mount Vernon, was around 1,000, and Broadhead and Livingston were smaller. Then in 1950, 20 years after the 1930, the towns were about the same size, but the county had lost population to around 11,000 or so. It was the hollows that emptied. Families left for employment in the cities, taking a part of the water with them. And part of the water's with these folk wherever they are today. We had the Owenses, the Morrises, the Singletons, the Creeches, the Shepherds, Mullinses, and I've left out a lot, and I apologize for that, but these were mainly the people that came in from Virginia, trekked in here, county by county, across Virginia, and stay maybe a generation, and build up a homestead, sell out, and move on. Came into North Carolina, did the same thing. And then came through the Cumberland Gap, following the route that Daniel Boone had laid out. And that route ran the ridge and came over the ridge just directly in front of us here. We lived on an exit off of that main route. So you think we were isolated in here, but we weren't. We were on the main road. Thousands and thousands of people came through the gap, came through here, on to Boonesboro, on to Harrisburg. Many of them wound up in Missouri, California, Texas, and across the nation. Very, very strong people, had to be, to wrestle a life out of this wilderness. I thank you for letting me come. I hope this little introduction might give you an idea of what it was like, and give you an idea of how important it is to us that the GSP is doing what they're doing here in terms of preserving for the naturalists, for the spelunker, for people like me who like to come see the kinfolk. This preserving that's going on keeps the old farm looking much like it did in those days back there in 1945 when we left. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland.
Next, we have Werner Judd, a longtime caver who first visited this place with his parents when he was a youngster and kept coming back and coming back and coming back. And he's the one who brought me here. He is a member and fellow of the National Speleological Society, but locally he is a member of the Greater Cincinnati Grotto. Werner was one of the founding board members of Rock Castle Karst Conservancy, the group that owns the cave, serving for the past 9 years. And significantly, for the past 17 years, he has been serving on the Great Saltpeter Cave Preserve Management Committee, mostly serving as treasurer. Those are a lot of credentials, but he really has his heart here. It just kept drawing him back. Werner?
I have a very limited amount of speaking time also, but I did have a few things I wanted to say and share. I very happy to see the turnout and the familiar faces. That makes me feel good about this. Nina said I've been on the committee since about 1994, but my message here is a much broader thing that I want to talk about. Cavers got this property in 1989, not long after the Felburn Foundation bought this place. And that whole story about the ownership of the Felburn and how it transitioned to Cavers, that's a separate story, and it's interesting, and I urge, if you're interested, to talk to folks or read about it. It's been recorded quite well. But this ceremony about the sign is more about when Cavers had this property and the history of what this place has done for the last 25 years. We don't refer to ourselves as spelunkers because we get involved with caves it becomes part of our identity. It enriches us, we have enjoyment out of it, and it becomes part of our lives. We kind of, as cavers, when we say spelunkers, we talk about people who go to caves as a random amusement. Not to say that that isn't a nice thing to do, but lots of people, they go in a cave once and they've had their fill. If cavers go in a cave once, they never have enough, and that's the big difference there. Our committee has spent a lot of time while we've had this place refining a management plan. We've got a strategic plan, and as Nina said, I spent most of my adult life devoted to this place and how those plans and ideas can be improved and changed and morphed for the changing times. What was a good idea in 1985 might not be such a good idea in 2005. So the people turn over and we think about how to adapt. The other important thing is the time span and the amount of history that's involved that goes way past us and much further behind us. This cave was here 100,000 years ago, which in human comprehension is just about equal to an eternity. Nobody can imagine 100,000 years. So all we know then is the geological evidence. It's very interesting. We have scientists that can tell us about it and how old it is, but it's rather academic and we can't really relate too much to it. And then there was a time when the American Indians were here. They didn't call themselves that. I'm sure they had their own name for themselves. We have evidence that they were in this cave. And that becomes a little more interesting because they're people. And right there we have a little connection. We can understand what motivates somebody to go in there because they're curious. And then we have a more recent period of time when the white man came in. And we had the hunters and the scouts and the trappers, and of course the settlers, and the time that Roland was talking about. And like us, they saw this cave, they were curious, they went in. We have better records of that. We even have some writing on the wall that confirms that. And of course the big flash bang for this cave was 1812. It was a military industrial complex. It was for the war machine. And this place was devastated for the timber to take care of the men and the cooking and to help make the gunpowder material. That we have great records on, but it's all just a memory now. It's just all interesting things to talk about on the tour and relate to because we have wars now, so we can assume how it was then. And then we have the time of John Lair. The cave was here for the enjoyment of entertainment, and he did a wonderful thing to bring people into a cave and let them experience it without fear of their life or limb. He made it a place to have a picnic at, practically. So I thank John Lair and all his kinfolk that are still around. But that memory is fading. And as those people that lived then get older and disappear, it will become more and more of a memory and end up in a book or records, modern books with our newer media. So we're at the time of cavers, and we are here to enjoy the property for what it is rather than what it can do. And I'm really happy to know that this sign is going to be something to show for the history of the future. Because in 2214, nobody here will be alive anymore. And there will be folks that will say, I hope, oh yeah, I remember back in the turn of the 21st century, this place was run by cavers. They had a non-profit. And yeah, we got some records about that. That was pretty cool. But we will all be gone, and we will all fade into a memory. The only thing that will be a legacy for it is records and books and videos and whatever else we can have for it are good, But it's really good that we have something made out of bronze that should last 200 years, maybe more. And everyone has a book to write about this place. Everyone can add to it, but the details and the background that make things what they are, they all fade away. They get all lost, they all get forgotten. Fortunately, people like Roland and many others write books, and it helps us remember. But for every book he writes, there's 1,000 other books. There's 200 books right here. People could tell their story. And I want to say thank you to all my fellow cavers who have helped us take care of this place. I want to thank, in respect to this, Tim Hale, standing right here. He's a caver from Dayton, and he started this process about getting this cave on a historic registry many years ago. There were committee meetings. Anybody who's on committees knows how that goes. And he got it started, he got the spurs kicked in, but his life redirected his focus and he had to pay attention to other things. But then Nina picked up on it, and she spent hundreds of hours getting this thing put together. And it was successful, and I thank you, Nina, for doing that. That was a remarkable thing. And I thank everyone to come here to witness this.
The next speaker that I planned was Ann Henderson, and I don't quite see her here yet.
No.
So,
Say who she is.
Ann Henderson is the daughter of John Lair. And it was very enjoyable to talk to her one afternoon. Werner and I went to visit her one afternoon a few years ago and sat and talked with her, looked at some of her mementos that she still kept from the time when her father was in charge of this cave, owned the cave, and was dealing with the cave as well as Renfro Valley, and trying to share the life of Appalachia, the wonderful life in the hills and hollers with the people that would be driving through on their way to vacations. So she was gracious enough to share her memories and share the mementos, and that added into the information which is in the National Register nomination. But I am very, very glad to invite Shirley Cummins from the Rockcastle Historical Society to come up here to say a few words about the importance of keeping track of things, document. Shirley?
Thank you, Nina, and for all the things that you all have done here. This has just been a really good opportunity for the Rockcastle Historical Society to express our appreciation to the Karst Conservancy, and hope that we'll become members. I feel like we've been negligent in so much that we've not already become a larger part. My husband and I have occasionally been here to visit on the open house, and he visited here when he was a child as well. Living only across the hillside there at Mullen Station, that's where his roots began. Probably much like Roland's. But the Historical Society, Rockcastle County Historical Society, is now housed at the Artec Garage there on Spring Street, in case anyone does not know, in Mount Vernon. And one of the main concerns that they have is to be sure and preserve history. We don't want anything to happen to our past roots. We're trying to preserve those things as we go. And for the Conservancy to take care of this cave has become a really very important thing, and I hope that you see only more growth from it, and more help, more assistance. And we also would like to express our appreciation to the National Council on Historical Preservation for commemorating this cave as well and its past history. And if we can do anything for you all in the future, I hope you'll just let us know. thank you all to everybody for coming out here today.
Now we have Mike Bryant, Mayor of Mount Vernon. Okay, so he's an official. Many people know him in this official capacity. But I first came to know him as a historical reenactor. He gathered some friends and family members to help portray life here on the frontier during our Saltpeter Festival 2 years ago. Mike?
I might have been a little bit more comfortable in that attire, to be honest. I loved it, camped down here by the river, and thought a little bit about the snakes during the night. You know, the reenactment tents do not have the sewn-in floors. So it crossed my mind more than one time during the night after hearing some stories about some of the reptiles. I bring you greetings from the large metropolis of Mount Vernon. And I want to add to what folks have already said by welcoming you to the Garden of Eden in Rockcastle County. I don't know, and I'm honest about this. I've traveled this county extensively, been on all the roads, been here for many, many years. Some of it used to be a bit boring. I did law enforcement for a number of years, so I've traveled this county. It is a beautiful place. In one sense, it's almost as though the whole thing is a type of garden. But if I had to choose a spot, which is a little bit difficult because there are so many beautiful areas within the boundaries of this county, I would truthfully have to refer to this as our Garden of Eden. And so it's a joy to be here. It's an honor to be invited, and I feel at home when I come to the cave. It's good to see folks whose faces I recognize. I'll miss names here, but the Cummins and the Mullins and the Camerons and the Vaughns and the McGuires and some folks, and then a lot of new faces. Some of my family, my wife Carol's here, my son Matt, and we just have a special love for this place. I want to read just a little blip of something just to give you some information so I can say that I kind of officially fulfilled my assignment here today. And then just real briefly a couple of other personal remarks. But Roland Mullins has been a friend of mine a long, long time. Former executive director of comprehensive care, former mayor, I think, for about 14 years of Mount Vernon, former county judge executive, historian, author, just a really, really good friend, dear friend. And Shirley Cummins and these folks are just people who've been in my life for many years. And I appreciate them, and I appreciate all of you and what you've done to preserve this. This is an important piece of our county. It's an important piece of our history. Lots of history here. Mount Vernon became a town in 1790. And so about, I guess, 8 years maybe after the founding of Mount Vernon was the known discovery of the cave. Now, as was alluded to earlier, likely there were other folks here previous to that. Certainly if they were in the area, I don't think they would want to miss the opportunity of this housing. It would have been all they needed and more. But that's not much about the history, except I want to read, this is the little blip I want to read to you. The area, as I said, was first settled in 1790, and it was founded around a feature called Spout Springs. Now, it's almost a blink you miss it kind of thing, but it is right in the center of Mount Vernon, and you can still go to that spot. Interestingly, much of the area that's now called Mount Vernon was really kind of a swampland at that time, and the settlement, as you might guess, was named for George Washington's home, which would have been Mount Vernon. And then the Wilderness Road came along shortly after, really about 1792, and the town was the principal settlement when Rockcastle became a county in 1810. Let me give you just, this place is so, this area and the whole county is so replete with history, valuable history. But Rockcastle County is roughly approximately about 300 square miles. 70% of this county is wooded, a portion of which is national forest. We have the 25 miles or so of interstate stretching through it with 2 exits. We have a couple of industrial parks. We have Renfro Valley Entertainment. We have Music Hall of Fame. We have the lake. We still have, not as frequent, we do still have the trains coming through Mount Vernon. And just a lot of history. So my wife says sometimes I'm too nostalgic and I tend to live in the past. I go back to those early days of my life and think about America then. But I also, even though I'm an old guy now, I still like to think to the future. And I believe that the potential and the prospects for Mount Vernon, Livingston, Broadhead, and all of Rockcastle County is unlimited. I don't know if I try, and I don't know that I can conceive how much potential there is. There's a strong emphasis now, on adventure tourism. Livingston, here in the county, recently has become designated, and the governor came down for this, as a state trailhead for canoeing, horseback riding, bike riding, and all kinds of things are going on. I'm glad to report that I have a good working relationship with the fiscal court, with Mayor Medley of Livingston, Mayor Cash of Broadhead, and other officials. And we do have a united front, and we're very passionate and very committed to bringing this county to some new horizons. And it has begun to happen. Somebody said to me the other day, Mount Vernon is dying. It's dying in the vine. There's nothing left. It's all empty. And I said, well, I find that very interesting, because even with openings and closures, in the last year when I gave the State of the City address to the chamber a while back, 13 new businesses had opened in Mount Vernon and remain open in just the last year. There are some empty spaces, not nearly as many as there were. The city of Mount Vernon still operates in the black. We have furloughed no employees. We've laid off new employees. We're rolling, sweating more bullets every year. We're still balancing the budget. I'm in the process of doing that one for this year. But there are good things happening here. When you come to this community, or if you live in this community, and I'm talking countywide, you are in a good place. And you're in a place that enjoys remembering affectionately the past. But you're in a place that is ready to have breakthrough and move forward like we've never seen. And I'm excited about that. And when you get as old as I am and you get excited, it must be pretty good stuff, because I don't get excited about too much anymore. But I'm just really happy to be here and excited to, enjoy this with you. Thank you for having me. Keep up the good work. And thank all of you for being here. God bless you, God bless Rockcastle County, and God bless America. Thank
you. Now, I would also like to invite Lila Mullins Powell to say a few words. When the Mullins family came to the Crooked Creek Valley, they were fruitful and multiplied and settled on different parts of the creek or the hillsides. Lila is the owner of the north entrance of this cave. She grew up here with her brother and sister, while her father, Richard Mullins, was caretaker for John Laird. She was a tour guide for a while and lives just down the road. We are very glad to be her neighbor.
I would like for my brother and sister, my family, all of them to come up, please.
Hey, Andrew.
It was an honor growing up here and being the daughter of Richard and Frances Mullins. I'm real proud of my parents. They were great. Proud of my whole family. And I have another family, the Cavers. I have known most of them since I was a small child. Love them all, and just want to thank everybody for coming out. And I'm proud of this place. And if anybody asks me where I'm from, I always say Saltpeter Cave. And if any of my family wants to speak, I'll let them say something.
Well, I'll take this to be brief. There's not a whole lot that I can say, but so many memories, and one in special that I'll never forget long as I live. We was over here one Saturday morning, and that lady right there, I heard her crying. She was about this tall, and she got around there and couldn't get down. But anyway, Mom and Dad got her down, but I can still remember seeing the old shed that used to be over here. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to try to be brief in saying the way it was as a kid. 5, 6, 7 years old. There was a shed around this, post in the ground, flat rock chair, and the kudzu vines are all the way around it, and a door on that end out there. And people would come in, and they would sit down and wait while Dad or Grandma or somebody would do the tour. And I can also remember, right in this area right here, there was a whole big pile of remnants from where Grandma pieced quilts when she was taking people to the cave. Now that's my memory, basically, of the Saltpeter Cave as a child. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Since this place is a community place, since the management committee, the cavers, we are a diverse group. Since this is all about community and family, I'd like to ask, before I introduce our last speaker, does anybody else have any words that they'd like to share?
Don't be shy.
Okay, finally, I'd like to recognize Mary Gratch, another longtime caver who now serves as the president of the Rock Castle Karst Conservancy. Like I said, the nonprofit organization who owns Great Saltpeter Cave, as well as a few other caves. She is also a fellow of the National Speleological Society and a member of the Greater Cincinnati Grotto. She has served on, as well as led, the GSP Management Committee. But currently, in her role as Rock Castle Karst Conservancy president or chair, or whatever you want to call your top dog, she's looking further than just this property, looking at the bigger picture of conservation.
On behalf of the Rock Castle Karst Conservancy, I would like to thank Nina Judd and the Great Saltpeter Committee for their countless hours of dedication that results in us being here today. In one way, Great Saltpeter Preserve is a special place. This listing is a great honor and solidifies its place in history because so many background supporting events are forgotten over time. The members of the Rock Castle Karst Conservancy are pleased to be stewards of the cave and share its contribution to Kentucky history and the development of the frontier. In a way, this is just a cave. Just like any other cave around here, water carved it out of limestone, streams wash surface dirt and debris into the cave, water flows through it to the water table below, microbes, insects, bats, and other creatures make their homes in this cave. It is part of an ecosystem in which we live and play. In Great Saltpeter Cave, we can see the amazing ways that water has carved the limestone walls. We can see the sediments that were washed in and that man has mined over 200 years ago. We can also see some of the creatures that live here. If we walk down the creek, we can usually see at least trickles of water which have passed through the cave on its way to the Rock Castle and Kentucky rivers. So Great Saltpeter Preserve is a special place, and Great Saltpeter Cave is Just Another Cave. I'd like you to consider that Just Another Cave is a special place and is worth preserving and protecting. Rock Castle Karst Conservancy was formed specifically to do that. In addition to Great Saltpeter Cave, we own 2 other cave preserves. We invite you to join our organization and help us acquire and manage more cave properties so that future generations can enjoy the thrill of cave exploration. In closing, I would also like to thank all the volunteers who have showed up this weekend and who continue to come time after time to help maintain this property. And I'd like to thank all of you, our guests, for sharing this occasion with us. Thank you.
Now, in order to memorialize the recognition of this particular cave's role in the history of the Commonwealth and the nation, and to show all who visit that we, as stewards of this cave, are dedicated to preserving and protecting the geological, biological, and historical aspects of Great Saltpeter Cave, we have a plaque that will be permanently displayed inside the cave. Now I'd like to ask the speakers to come back up, as well as Mike McGuire and our current chair of the Great Saltpeter Cave Preserve Committee, Chris Hacker. And that does include Edna and Buddy, you were speakers. Please take one of these strings.
Sorry.
Excellent. Come on in. We've got the drinks for everybody to grab. Rolling. And let's come in.
Like a farm between 2 roses.
Oh, you stay right there. That's good.
Group photo, group shot.
Here's somebody. Oh, that's short.
Bunch in a little bit more.
Yeah, tighten up.
Tighten up.
And we're gonna go on 3 and lift upwards. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, wow.
It's not plastic, folks.
Oh, they did you proud. Beautiful plan. Congratulations.
Very much.
A lot of
This is the best part right here. The date. Everybody who knows me understands that.
Oh, really?
Nina, you decided where this plaque
We'll place the plaque not in this first entrance room, but just beyond, in the next space where the
The
cave
official designation of placement is just beyond the twilight zone of the cave, just past where the light came.
And now everybody can gather